On the evening of March 31st, 2006, a 27-year-old medical student named Brian Shaffer had dinner with his father, Randy, at an Outback Steakhouse in Columbus, Ohio. It was a Friday. Spring break had just started at Ohio State University, where Brian was in his second year of medical school. Randy noticed that his son looked exhausted. He had been studying through the night earlier that week, cramming for exams. He thought Brian should probably just go home and sleep. But he didn't say anything. And so after dinner, Brian hugged his dad, got in his car, and drove off to meet up with a friend. Now, Brian was by all accounts a person who was easy to like. He had grown up in Pickerington, a quiet suburb just outside Columbus, and had spent the last 8 years working towards becoming a doctor. He was 6'2", athletic, funny, charismatic, the kind of person people noticed when he walked into a room. He had a Pearl Jam tattoo on his upper right arm. He had a girlfriend named Alexis Wagoner, also a medical student at Ohio State. The two of them had plane tickets booked for Miami that coming Monday, a spring break trip they had been looking forward to for a while. And beyond that, there was a quiet expectation among people who knew them that Brian was probably going to propose to Alexis sometime that year. His life, in other words, was moving in a very clear direction. There was one thing that had been weighing on him, though. 3 weeks before that Friday night, his mother, Renee, had died of cancer. It had hit him hard, but his friends told police that he didn't seem depressed. He seemed like someone who was grieving but still showing up, still planning, still living his life. So that night, Brian met up with his friend and former roommate, William Clint Florence, and the two of them went bar hopping in the short north area of Columbus. They started at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a popular bar located on the second floor of a building called The Gateway on North High Street, accessible by escalator. After a while, they moved on to other spots in the area. At some point around midnight, they ran into a friend of Clint's named Meredith Reed, who offered to drive them back to the Ugly Tuna for one last round. The three of them rode the escalator back up to the second floor entrance at around 1:15 a.m. on April 1st. Just before 2 a.m., Brian stepped outside the bar's entrance area and was caught on the security camera there. He was talking to two young women he apparently didn't know. He seemed completely fine. No signs of distress, no argument, nothing unusual. He talked with them for a few minutes, and then he turned around and walked back toward the bar's entrance, stepping out of the camera's frame. That was the last confirmed sighting of Brian Shaffer. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., Clint and Meredith started looking for Brian. They couldn't find him. They called his phone. No answer. They waited outside at the bottom of the escalator, expecting him to come down with the rest of the crowd. He never came. At the time, they figured he had probably just slipped out and gone home without telling them. It was late. People were leaving in all directions. They went home. The next day, Alexis tried calling him. Voicemail. She didn't think too much of it at first. But Sunday passed, and she still hadn't heard from him. And then Monday morning came, the day of their flight to Miami, and Brian didn't show up. He wasn't answering his phone. He hadn't used his bank account. He hadn't been home. Alexis called Randy. Randy immediately knew something was wrong and filed a missing persons report with Columbus police. Investigators went straight to the Ugly Tuna Saloona and pulled the surveillance footage. What they found stopped them cold. The cameras covered the bar's main entrance, the only publicly accessible entrance and exit. Officers went through every minute of footage from that night. They identified and accounted for every single person who walked out of that bar, every one of them, except Brian. He had been captured on camera going in. He had been captured on camera outside just before 2 a.m., and then he simply wasn't there anymore. No footage of him leaving through the main entrance. No footage of him going down the escalator. Nothing. Police then looked at the building itself. The Ugly Tuna was inside the Gateway building, which at the time had a section under heavy construction on one side. There was a service door on the east side of the building that led out to this construction area, and from there to the street. That door was not covered by a camera. A Columbus police sergeant told reporters at the time that the construction area was heavily active and would have been difficult to navigate even for someone who was sober, but it existed. and it was the only exit that wasn't on film. Investigators searched everywhere. They went through the bar, the movie theater next door, the construction site, the surrounding streets, the nearby Olentangy River. They searched dumpsters and rooftops and alleys. They eventually got permission from the city to search the sewer system beneath the area. They found nothing, no blood, no personal belongings, no signs of a struggle, anywhere. Brian's apartment on King Avenue, 6 blocks from the bar, was undisturbed. His car was still parked outside. Everything inside looked exactly as he had left it. His cell phone went straight to voicemail every time anyone called. His bank account was never touched again. His credit cards were never used. His passport never crossed a border. Then, in September 2006, something strange happened. Alexis called his phone out of habit, the way she had been doing every night. This time, instead of going straight to voicemail, it rang 3 times, and then went silent. Police traced the signal and found it had pinged a cell tower in Hilliard, Ohio, a suburb about 14 miles northwest of Columbus. Investigators looked into it but ultimately concluded it was most likely a technical glitch. The phone never made a sound again after that. Also, that September, while the search was still going, Randy Shaffer, Brian's father, walked outside his home one evening during a storm. A tree blew over and fell directly on top of him. A neighbor found his body the next morning. Randy Shaffer died in September 2008, 2.5 years after his son vanished, without ever getting an answer. He had spent every one of those years searching. He put up flyers, he hired a private investigator, he went on television, he called psychics. He and Brian's younger brother Derek put on waders and walked the shores of the Olentangy River near the OSU campus, searching around bridge piers, because a psychic had told Randy that Brian's body might be in the water near a bridge. They found nothing. At a Pearl Jam concert in Cincinnati later in 2006, lead singer Eddie Vedder stopped the show between songs and asked the crowd directly for any information about Brian's disappearance. A few tips came in through Crime Stoppers. None of them led anywhere. Investigators interviewed more than 100 people. Everyone connected to Brian that night was asked to take a polygraph test. Meredith Reed took one and passed. The 2 women Brian had been seen talking to outside the bar were later identified. They passed as well and told investigators in 2009 that they had never even been asked to take one until years after the fact. Clint Florence, the friend who had been with Brian the entire evening, refused to take a polygraph test. He hired a lawyer and declined to cooperate further with the investigation. Columbus police have said they never had enough evidence to name him a suspect, but his refusal has never stopped being a point of focus for people following the case. Over the years, possible sightings were reported in Michigan, Texas, and even Sweden. None were confirmed. In 2019, a photo of an American man in Tijuana, Mexico began circulating online because of his resemblance to Brian. Columbus news station 10 TV sent the image to the detective handling the case. The detective forwarded it to the FBI for facial recognition analysis. The FBI concluded the man in the photo was not Brian Shaffer. In March 2021, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation released an age-progressed photo showing what Brian might look like at 42 years old, nearly 15 years after he disappeared. The case appeared on national television programs including Dateline and America's Most Wanted. None of it produced a confirmed lead. As recently as 2026, 20 years after Brian walked into that bar, Columbus police confirmed the case is still open. Investigators have said publicly they believe someone out there has information that could close it. A basement in a house near Lane Avenue in Columbus was reportedly searched by police in connection with a person of interest whose name has never been officially released. That search found nothing. The case remains exactly where it has always been. Brian Shaffer's brother Derek is the only immediate family member still alive. He and his wife issued a statement at the 20-year mark that read, "Every day we think about Brian and can't believe it's been 20 years. We still continue to hope and pray to have answers someday and wish that anyone who knows anything would come forward." Here is what is known for certain. On the night of March 31, 2006, Brian Shaffer went into the Ugly Tuna Saloona in Columbus, Ohio. Security cameras captured him entering the building. Security cameras covered the only public exit. He was seen on camera just before 2 a.m., talking to two women outside the entrance and then walking back inside. No camera recorded him leaving. Every other person who was in that bar that night was identified and accounted for on the footage. Brian was not among them. His phone never worked again. His bank account never moved again. His passport never crossed a border again. No hospital ever admitted him. No police department anywhere ever had contact with him. He did not surface in another city, under another name, or in any official record of any kind. Brian Shaffer was born on February 11, 1979. He would be 47 years old today.